From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Tingle, an award-winning author and storyteller greatly influenced by his heritage and experience as an Oklahoma Choctaw. He has interviewed and recorded the stories of tribal elders in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and Oklahoma, in addition to retracing the roots of the Trail of Tears to Choctaw homelands. This research inspired the bulk of his literary works as stories like Walking the Choctaw Road, Crossing Bok Chitto, and Blackgoat, Navajo Prisoner, are middle-grade novels that deal with the struggles of Native Americans. His latest fictional release to young readers is How I Became a Ghost, Roadrunner Press, a story that's told through the lens of a young boy Isaac who becomes a ghost on the Trail of Tears. It deals with a variety of both tragic and fantasy-like folklore experiences as he travels with a group of interesting comrades in an attempt to help family and friends survive. The mission of my directorate at the Library of Congress is to actually preserve all of the materials in their original reformatted form. And as I read this book, I was compelled to buy it and read it. And it really serves to both educate, uplift, and preserve the history and culture of the American Indian people. I found it poignant and extremely uplifting. And you will enjoy this no matter what your age. Please note there are microphones in the aisle if you would like to ask questions at the end of the session. And the book signing is in booth number 4 at 3 p.m. Without further ado, please join me in a warm welcome to Tingle.
Thank you. Halito, it's a wonderful honor to be here. And as a way of helping break American Indian stereotypes which fill our lives daily, I want to don a true Indian headdress for you all to witness, a headdress that was made by a Choctaw and gifted to me at our Choctaw Labor Day celebration. This is the true Choctaw headdress. It actually is. And it was given to me by a Choctaw. It was veeded by a Choctaw. And most Indians today, this is the headdress you're going to see us wear. I was raised Choctaw on the Texas Gulf Coast of Oklahoma Choctaw. We're the third largest Indian tribe in America. But most people are not that aware of Choctaws, not like some of the Plains tribes, because they don't make movies about Choctaws. And from the early day, beginning back in the American Revolution, we have fought on the side of the American Army. That's something that we still take pride in going back historically. I have a Choctaw teacher named Charlie Jones, who was our official tribal storyteller for going on 40 years. And as he grew old, he kind of picked me out. I flew up to walk with him on a 21-mile reenactment of the Choctaw Trail of Tears, and I found him, and he was an old man, slow and walking by himself, and I walked with him for 10 miles, and he told me one story after another, and then he became my mentor for over 10 years until he died. He told me stories, he taught me songs, and so everything I do to honor Charlie Jones. But one of the most blessed lessons he ever taught me, once he realized that I was learning the stories, and I was beginning to write, and I was starting to speak, he said, "There will come a time when you will be in an auditorium and it will be overflowing with people. There will be hundreds more people than there are seats for, and you will walk out and your temptation will be to be so proud that they've all come to hear you talk. But there will be other times when there will be as many empty seats as there are people to hear you talk. That is the time to celebrate, he said. For you know that Choctaws never go away. You know your ancestors are always there, keeping an eye out for you. Something has happened. They have not heard you tell these old stories nearly enough. They have conspired for there to be enough empty seats for every one of your Choctaw relatives to hear you tell. But not only the relatives of Choctaws, but the people that choose to come and hear you talk. Their kinfolks who have gone before are also there. So be honored. And when you see a seat, see your grandmother, see your brother, see your uncle, see those who have gone before. He told me that. And what a wonderful blessing that was. Consider that for a speaker to feel more happiness and joy when you see empty seats for the old Choctaw elders to have a place to rest their weary bones, because so many of us are still walking that old trail of tears. But to open, I wanted to share a blessing song that was sung, because by the time of the Trail of Tears in 1830, most Choctaws, overwhelmingly, we had already adopted that we were Christian. And the first book ever published in Choctaw was a collection of old hymns brought to us by the Methodist and Presbyterian missionaries. And many Choctaws even today say the way we were able to survive is we sang our song every day before the walk. I'll be at our big Choctaw Labor Day celebration Monday. It attracts 120,000 people to a little town in southeast Oklahoma that usually has 200. 120,000 people come. And every day, every hour, somewhere on those grounds, you can hear, we are a nation. We have our own flag. Every 4 years, I vote in 2 national elections. The capital here and the capital in Durant, Oklahoma. And we also have our national anthem, our national song. And I want to sing it as a way of sharing the Choctaw blessing with you. And many of you will recognize it by the tune. We sing it every day as we walk that old trail. The words of it in English and Choctaw both are in how it came and goes. She long this holy go by mine. It is me, the fool, like child, high give by Shabi, Yah. It is me, your goodbye. In Choctaw in the world, when you say, we still use that old hymn book originally published in 1820. When any Choctaw in the world says, we're going to sing hymn number 48, they all know what it is, no matter how young or old you are. I was raised on the Texas Gulf Coast, and I was warned by my grandmother, who had had her land allotment taken away, who had been sent to a boarding school and suffered unbelievable things there. She made all 30 of the grandkids promise we would never tell even our closest friends that we were Indian. She was afraid of what might happen to us. But once a week during the middle of the sermon, my dad and his brothers, my uncles, would gather all 30 of us, throw us in the back of pickup trucks, and drive 200 miles to the big thicket of East Texas. Now it's a national forest. At the time, it was a national wilderness. There were woods, brown bears, every kind of snake imaginable. We would park on the edge and walk for a full day. And all we could bring was big gallon jugs of water, salt, pepper, coffee. And that was it. So for a whole week, we had to hunt and fish for everything. My dad was an amazing squirrel hunter. And once after he died, my uncle took me up to southeast Oklahoma, and we just stayed at a little motel and walked over a few graveyards, and he said, you remember your dad and his squirrel hunting? And I said, oh yeah, back in those trips, he would show up with enough squirrel to feed us all. We'd have scrambled eggs and squirrel. It was something. He'd say, do you remember your dad ever bringing a gun out to hunt those squirrel with us? I said, well, no, I don't. I guess it would have woken us up if he shot me. He said, well, how do you think he got the squirrels? I said, how did he get the squirrels? And then he said, think about it. And I remembered, my dad he never talked. He never talked. I worked with him in Virginia on a pipeline one summer. At the end of the pipeline, he said, son, you better figure out a way to make your living talking, because that's all you know how to do. Now, I know you're laughing, but that was my father's blessing to my public speaking. That's what he meant. He just said it in a different way, yeah. So he never talked. He never told. And if he tried to tell a joke, he would always tell the punchline first, so it would work. Which just was a joke. My grandmother called him Funny Man, and we all thought it was facetious. It wasn't. Funny, F-U-N-I, is a Choctaw word for squirrel. My father could talk to the squirrels. He would go out in that big thick wood and lean up against a tree. And soon there'd be a squirrel going, and my dad would go. And they would talk back and forth until finally the squirrel would down, and my dad would pull out. Just like that. I know, it surprised the squirrel too. Same thing. Surprised the squirrel, just like that. Just like that. And he'd come back with a dozen squirrels hanging by the tail from his belt and cook those squirrels with scrambled eggs for breakfast. Those are the stories that I grew up with. And when you grow up with those stories, how can you not be a writer? How can you not? I had heard those stories, and I began to share some stories in small groups. And then my son got to be in the 5th grade, which is when you study American history in Texas. And I got so excited because he's going to learn the truth of the Choctaw Trail of Tears in his study of American history in a small town in Texas. Yeah, you can laugh now. That would be appropriate laughter. Not going to happen. So that started me in the late 80s. I started traveling where Choctaws are and carrying a little tape recorder and recording those stories. It became my first collection of short stories, Walking the Choctaw Road. And how it became the Ghost is the expansion of one of those Trail of Tears stories into a novel. It's written for middle grade, they say 4th through 7th grade. And the reason I chose to write for that audience is I remember those trips to the woods when I was that age. The stories I was told will never, ever leave me. The stories of how my great-grandfather, John Carnes, walked from Mississippi, how his mother died by receiving one of those deliberately infected with smallpox blankets. She died on the trail, but they carried her body all the way to Oklahoma where she was buried. I heard those stories, and I remember what an impression and how it stayed with me. And I also realized that by the time you reach high school, so many of your opinions and attitudes are firm. And so I wanted to write a book that would reach the same age of mind that I was when I first heard the story. The entire book is narrated by a 10-year-old boy. It's the beginning of a series, and I write 1,000 to 2,000 words a day, every day, on the next book in the series. I want to read from you just a short opening paragraph. Isaac is the boy's name. Chapter 1, this is the opening. Chapter 1, Choctaw Nation, Mississippi, 1830. Maybe you've never read a book written by a ghost before. I'm a ghost. I'm not a ghost when this book begins, so you have to pay very close attention. I should tell you something else. I see things before they happen. You're probably thinking, I wish I could see things before they happen. Be careful what you wish for. I'm 10 years old. My name is Isaac, and I'm not a ghost yet. Isaac's best friend is 16 years old. He can shapeshift into a panther, which makes it very convenient for survival on the Trail of Tears. So you know from the opening paragraph that our hero will not survive the entire book, which as a writer gives me wonderful liberty to end a chapter with a boulder on its edge about to crush him, or something from a tree about to leap on him, and then you open the other chapter and it doesn't happen. So when it least is expected, this is what happens. So many students, and I do a lot of school visits, so many students will ask me, so do you believe in ghosts? Do Choctaws really believe in ghosts? And I usually say it's part of our tradition in school, but to this audience, I'll say a deep form of truth. When someone asks me, do you believe in ghosts? My first thought is to say, do you believe in the sun? I mean, it's not a matter of belief. It's there. It rises, it sets, it's part of our life. You don't have to believe in the sun. If you don't believe in the sun, it's still going to be there. Because that's how it is in Choctaws. In the course of my research, my master's thesis, and the books, over 20 years of interviewing Choctaw elders, I've interviewed thousands of Choctaw elders, and I have never met a Choctaw who has not seen a ghost. I know that sounds very strange. To us, it's not magic realism. It's not supernaturalism. It's part of our life. It's part of our life. People that we love never go away. When I feel writer's block coming on, I know exactly what to do. I give myself a week. I drive 9 hours north to a tiny town in Oklahoma. Doesn't matter which. I get a little motel, and I just start walking out through the woods. Because all over those Coyote Mountains in southeast Oklahoma, you'll see small little graveyards with maybe the foundation of what used to be a church and a community. But the wonderful place is where you see little mounds off in the woods where they maybe shouldn't be. There's no reason for them being there. And some people will think, well, there was a landfall and then the grass grew up, but that's not what happened. In the old days, before they buried people, after the Trail of Tears, and for another 50, 70 years, Choctaws would dig a hole, lay the body, cover it with a mound of grass, and leave one end of it open for the coming and going of the spirit. And when you walk over those old grounds, I have a writer friend, Rilla Askew, a wonderful writer, and she heard me talk and brag on one of her novels one speech I was giving, and she said, you know, those trips you're taking to the graveyard, she said, those are very important because you're walking over the grass and you're waking people up who have never heard their stories and had them told, and you're carrying them home to your desk. When you pop open your laptop, your fingers are flowing through their stories. And part of my responsibility as a writer, I feel that so many writers feel this, that if we don't share these stories, no one will. No one will. Young Isaac. He tells a story, rather than reading it, I'll just share it with you. Isaac, it was in the coldest part of the Trail of Tears. His home had been burned down, and he was walking with his family, and the snow and the ice was there, and he didn't have any shoes. The house had been burned down in the middle of the night. All they had was what they'd gone to bed with that night. and the ice and the snow came, and he would lean up against the tree and rock back and forth as the sun was rising, ready to begin that day's walk. And they would sing and whisper, Shalom, Shalom, the hymn. And he said his dad always told him, you need to lift your feet when they're singing the song. Sometimes they sing it half an hour. You don't need to stand there in the ice. And he said, one morning I realized too late why he was warning me, Dad. Because when I lifted my left foot to start walking with the others, the skin of the bottom of my foot tore away. And I put my foot down and it stung and it hurt something terrible. And when I lifted my right foot, the ice grabbed onto it and the skin of my right foot tore away too, and it stung so bad. And then people began to walk. And my father said, come on, it's time. And so I tried walking on the hills with my feet, and I tried walking on the balls with my feet, but it was hurting so bad. And I was leaving bloody footprints in the snow. Every step I took, I looked behind me, and I was leaving bloody footprints in the snow. And I tried running faster to outrun the bloody footprints, but it didn't work. The footprints, they ran faster too. And then my father stopped, and he saw how far I was falling behind. And he knelt down and waited for me. And I stumbled, my feet hurt so bad, they burned and they froze at the same time. I fell into my father's arms, and I wrapped my arms around him. And he said, now, son. He lifted me up. And he put his palms on my cheeks and turned my face around till I could see over a mile of bloody footprints I had left in the snow. And then he turned my face back around and he pointed forward and he said, son, you cannot keep your eyes on the bloody footprints of the past. You must keep your eyes on where you are going. That's what I try to remember as a Choctaw writer. We have our past to share, but we cannot keep our eyes so grounded in the bloody footprints of the past. We must keep our eyes on where we are going. We're going to a deeper level of understanding as writers and as people. Thank you for sharing Isaac's journey with me. And now, if there are any questions, please feel free to step to the microphone. It's in the hallway. It's right to your left, 6 spaces back. Yeah,
well, sir, I'm part Choctaw as well, but I wasn't raised traditionally by neither were my parents. And so I was wondering, other than your stories, is there any resources that I can go to learn more about my culture?
Are you Oklahoma or Mississippi Choctaw?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. I would go to the website, choctawnation.com, www.choctawnation.com, and we have a new chief as of about 6 months ago. We have a brand new chief. He's taken a great interest in the importance of digital information. So if you go to that website, there are about 10 to 20-minute films of Choctaw history that you can watch right from the website. It'll have a complete book list, and that's a great source of resources. Also, on that site, go to the Choctaw Nation bookstore. And Tingle at hotmail.com. If you will email me, remind me you asked the question, I'll send you my top 10 recommended list of Choctaw books.
Thank you.
Be glad to. Sure. Yes. Have you ever seen the sun? It was a flood that was such a destructive flood that I could turn on CNN, and once every 30 minutes I could see a helicopter view of my house below. It was blowing a million gallons a second over a dam. I live right on the side of the lake, creeping up, closer and closer to my house. Everyone left the neighborhood, but I have a collection of about 40 first editions of John Steinbeck, 6 of them signed, so I wasn't going to leave, you know. So down the hill, washed away by the flood, was a little warehouse I built for lawnmowers and tools, and my son had put a box of books there that had my father's Masonic Bible. A few weeks before my father died, I gave it to my son. My son put it there while he was moving. It was washed away with everything else. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I smelled this sweet, sweet cigar smoke. And I knew what it was. It was my dad's old cigar that my mother always ran out of the house to go smoke. I knew what it was, and I knew my father was there. And I sat up and I said, Dad, if you're here to warn me about the flood, I thank you. You saved my life. But if you're here just because you miss me as much as I miss you, I'll spend a minute or two with you. And I could hear my dad laugh and nod. And a couple of minutes later, the cigar smoke and my dad was gone. And I walked downstairs with a flashlight to shine to see how close the water was getting to the house. And I saw that the treetops had caught something. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was something that was spinning around, flowing uphill against a water flow of 1 million gallons a second over the dam. And at the first light of sunlight, I went down and I shined the light around, and I saw that my father's Masonic Bible had spun and floated backwards and was caught in a rock flower bed next door. I didn't need confirmation of my belief that they're always here, but that was my most powerful one. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? I would like to answer the 5 minutes. I would like to answer the unasked question of how to be a writer, what to do as a writer. How many of you have stories that you need to tell, that you've never sat down and written them because you don't have the faith in yourself as a writer? Raise your hand. How many of you are lying by not raising your hand? Okay, that's quite a few more. Okay. One way to do this, it's a simple way. First thing, if you want to be a writer, read. Read. And if you want to be an American Indian writer, or if you want to write about American Indian things, here's something you absolutely need to be aware of. I cannot believe I'm going to say this, and it's actually being filmed. You know how so many Western European cultures have stolen so much from Native American culture and claimed it as their own. The worst example I could ever tell you of is a group of Britishers that came shortly after Columbus came. They captured Indians, they came to the South, they captured Choctaws, and they took them back. And they forced them to learn English. They forced them to change their names so they sounded British. And there was a young Choctaw boy like myself who didn't like to play stickball so much as he loved to write. And he wrote little dramas for his friends to play. And Balili was his name. It means running Choctaw. Balili, that's what they called him. But the Britishers insisted that he take the name Billy. And he started writing plays there. And then someone said, Billy, that doesn't sound distinguished enough. He's writing plays that are being attended by the Queen. So they made him take the name William Shakespeare. I know. It's never been told before. He was Choctaw. We claimed him. Yeah, that was a dumb joke. But I do, even for elementary, middle school kids, I think the foundation of Western literature is so much grounded in William Shakespeare. Even as an American Indian author, as an ethnic writer, I think the plays of Shakespeare are critical to know, even from that early age. And then read. Have something you're reading. I always have folks that, when I'm with kids, I'll tell you who the serious readers are. When you travel with your folks on a 2-3 day weekend vacation, you always bring the book you're reading, but you always bring 2 or 3 other books. Why? And only the true reader knows the answer to that. Because when you finish the book you're reading, the worst nightmare imaginable is not to have another book to read. We're in heaven today. It's the National Book Festival. Chipisalachiki. In Choctaw, there's no word for goodbye. When we're parting, we always say, I will see you in the future, because we always will. Chipisalachiki. Yakoke. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.